When everything goes wrong, Rachel Bennett stared at the flashing red light on her dashboard and whispered a prayer to whatever deity protected broke journalists with unreliable cars. Her 2009 Honda Civic had seen better days. Probably around the time the first iPhone came out. But it was all she could afford on her freelance income. The morning sun blazed through her windshield as she navigated Boston traffic. Already running 15 minutes late for the biggest interview of her life, Crosstech Industries was the golden ticket she needed. A staff position with actual benefits and a steady paycheck. Instead of chasing stories for pennies, she reached for her coffee in the cup holder, took a quick sip, and looked up just in time to see brake lights. Her foot slammed the pedal. The Honda's worn brakes had other ideas. The sickening crunch of metal meeting metal echoed through the street. The man who owned everything. Rachel sat frozen, gripping her steering wheel as her brain processed what just happened. Through her cracked windshield, she could see the back of a sleek black Bugatti, a car that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, and Rachel's stomach dropped even further. Tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair styled perfectly despite the early hour. He wore a charcoal suit that screamed expensive, and even from a distance, she could see the sharp line of his jaw set in anger. He walked toward her car with purposeful strides. Rachel forced herself to get out, her legs shaky. "I am so sorry. My brakes, they just didn't work fast enough and you stopped so suddenly." The man stopped in front of her and Rachel got her first good look at his face. Strong features, dark eyes that seemed to pierce right through her, and an expression that could freeze water. "You're blaming me for stopping?" "No, I just meant that I couldn't stop in time, because my car is old, and your car is obviously very expensive, and I am so incredibly sorry." The words tumbled out in a rush. His eyes narrowed. "Do you have insurance?" Rachel felt heat creep up her neck. "Yes, of course I have insurance." "Basic liability. Basic liability," he repeated the words like they tasted bad. "Do you have any idea how much this car costs?" "A lot," Rachel offered weakly. $3.5 million. The world tilted sideways. Rachel grabbed the hood of her car for support. "I'm sorry, did you say million?" "You heard correctly." He pulled out his phone. "I'll need your insurance information and contact details." The universe laughs. Rachel fumbled in her purse for her insurance card, hands trembling. This could not be happening. She was going to lose everything over a fender bender. Her savings would not even cover the cost of his side mirror. Here, she thrust the card at him, then grabbed a business card from her wallet. "And here's my contact information." "I really am sorry, Mr. Cross. Julian Cross." The name hit her like a second collision. Julian Cross. As in the Julian Cross, who founded Crosstech Industries at age 25. The Julian Cross whose face graced the cover of Forbes magazine. The Julian Cross whose company she was supposed to interview with in exactly 20 minutes. "Oh no." The words escaped before she could stop them. He looked up from photographing her insurance card. "Oh no, what?" "Nothing. Just processing my terrible life choices." Rachel checked her watch. "Look, I really need to go. I have an interview, and I'm already late, and hitting your car has pretty much destroyed any chance I had. But I should at least show up and apologize for wasting their time." Julian's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been curiosity. An interview where? Rachel wanted to lie, to say anywhere else, but she had never been good at deception. Crosstech Industries. "I was interviewing for a senior content writer position. For the first time since the accident, something resembling a smile touched his lips. It was not a kind smile. "Is that so?" "I know what you're thinking. The girl who just crashed into your $1 million car wants to work at your company." "Trust me, I'm aware of the irony. You know who I am." "It was not a question. Everyone knows who you are, Mr. Cross. You're kind of a big deal." Rachel pulled her keys from her pocket. "I should go. I'll be waiting for the lawsuit." She turned to get back in her car, but his voice stopped her. "Wait." Rachel turned back slowly. Julian was looking at her with an expression she could not read. "This interview at my company. You want this job?" "Wanted. Past tense." I'm pretty sure hitting the CEO's car is an automatic disqualification. What if it wasn't? Rachel blinked. What? What if I told you I could make this accident disappear? No lawsuit, no insurance claim, no financial burden. Hope flared in her chest before common sense crushed it. What's the catch? Julian stepped closer and Rachel had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. The catch is that you work for me, directly as my personal assistant. I'm a writer, not an assistant. You'll write press releases, speeches, internal communications. But you'll also manage my schedule, handle my correspondence, and essentially make sure my life runs smoothly. His dark eyes held hers. In exchange, I'll forgive the damage to my car and pay you double what the writer position offered. Rachel's mind raced. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Why would you do that? Because I need someone who isn't intimidated by me. Someone who will speak their mind instead of telling me what I want to hear. His lips curved into that not-quite smile again. You've already proven you're not afraid to blame me for your mistakes. I didn't blame you. I just said you stopped, suddenly. My point exactly. Julian pulled a business card from his wallet. Come to this address at 9 tomorrow morning. We'll discuss the details. And Rachel? She had not told him her first name. He must have read it on her business card. Yes. Don't be late again. Making impossible choices, Rachel sat in her car long after Julian drove away, staring at his business card. The address was for Crosstech's executive floor. It's the kind of place where regular employees needed special clearance just to visit. Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend Jen. How did the interview go? Rachel typed back. I crashed into the CEO's car. Now he wants to hire me as his assistant. Send help. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, what? Call me right now. But Rachel did not call. She started her battered Honda, which miraculously still ran, and drove home in a daze. The logical part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. Working directly for Julian Cross would be impossible. He was arrogant, controlling, and clearly used to getting exactly what he wanted. The man drove a $3 million car and probably thought normal people were a different species. But the practical part of her brain, the part that worried about rent and student loans and whether her car would survive another winter, saw an opportunity she could not refuse. Double the salary. No lawsuit. A chance to write at one of the biggest tech companies in the world. That night, Rachel barely slept. She kept replaying the moment their eyes met, the way he had looked at her like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. She had met plenty of powerful men in her journalism career, but none of them had made her feel quite so off balance. At 8:30 the next morning, she stood in front of Crosstech's gleaming tower, wearing her best interview suit and carrying the last shreds of her dignity. Time to find out if she had just made the best decision of her life or signed a deal with the devil himself. Rachel took a deep breath and walked through the revolving doors, ready to face whatever Julian Cross had in store for her. The first day of Wartha elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like ascending to another planet. Rachel watched the numbers climb, each floor taking her further from the safety of normal office life and closer to whatever chaos awaited her. The doors opened to reveal a reception area. Looked like it belonged in a modern art museum. Everything was white marble, glass, and chrome. A woman sat behind a curved desk, her blonde hair pulled back so tight it probably gave her headaches. Rachel Bennett, Rachel said, trying to sound confident. I have an appointment with Mr. Cross. The receptionist's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. He's expecting you. Straight down the hall, last door on the right. Rachel's heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked. Through glass walls, she could see people working in sleek offices, all of them looking busy and important. She felt like an imposter in her department store suit. The last door stood open. Rachel knocked on the frame. Come in. Julian's voice was as commanding as she remembered. His office was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. Julian sat behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black stone, typing on a laptop. He looked up, and those dark eyes assessed her in a way that made her spine straighten automatically. You're on time, good. Sit. Rachel sat in one of the chairs facing his desk. Feeling like a student called to the principal's office, Julian leaned back in his chair, studying her. I had my team look into your background. Graduated top of your class from Boston University. 5 years of freelance journalism with an impressive portfolio. 3 investigative pieces that won regional awards. So tell me, Rachel Bennett, why are you struggling? The question caught her off guard. Excuse me? Your car's 12 years old. You live in a studio apartment in Elston? Your bank account suggests you're one emergency away from financial disaster. With your credentials, you should be doing much better. What's the problem? Rachel felt anger flash through her. The problem is that journalism doesn't pay well unless you work for a major publication. And major publications want you to have experience at major publications. It's a circle that's impossible to break into. So you gave up and applied for corporate work. I didn't give up. I adapted. There's a difference. Something flickered in Julian's expression. Approval, maybe. Here's how this is going to work. You'll manage my calendar, which includes approximately 30 meetings per week, 12 conference calls, and whatever social obligations I can't avoid. You'll write everything I need written, from emails to speeches. You'll screen my calls, organize my travel, and basically ensure that nothing falls through the cracks. Rachel pulled out her phone to take notes. Okay, I'm not finished. Julian stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. You'll also attend every meeting with me, take detailed notes, and tell me honestly what you think. Not what you think I want to hear. What do you actually think? You want me to criticize you? He turned to face her. I want you to tell me the truth. Everyone else in this building is too afraid of me to be honest. You're not afraid, are you, Rachel? She met his gaze directly. Should I be? The corner of his mouth twitched. Probably. But I don't think fear is in your nature. Learning the rules Rachel's first week was baptism by fire. Julian's schedule was insane, starting at 7 in the morning and often running past 8 at night. He moved through meetings like a shark through water, all focused intensity and sharp decisions. What surprised her was how good he was at his job. Julian was not just a figurehead CEO who inherited wealth. He had built Crosstech from nothing, and he knew every aspect of the business intimately. When engineers talked about code, he understood. When finance discussed projections, he could spot problems they missed. But he was also impossibly demanding. These talking points are weak. Julian tossed the paper back across her desk on Thursday afternoon. The investor call is in 2 hours. Rewrite them. Rachel gritted her teeth. What specifically is wrong with them? Everything. They're boring, generic, and sound like every other tech company. I need something that makes our investors remember why they chose us. Maybe if you gave me more than 3 hours' notice, I could craft something memorable. Julian stopped halfway to his office and turned around slowly. The other employees in the area suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. What did you say? Rachel stood up, meeting his stare. I said that if you want quality work, I need reasonable deadlines. You handed me this assignment at lunch and now you're surprised it's not perfect. That's not fair. The silence stretched so long that Rachel wondered if she had just gotten herself fired on day 4. Then Julian smiled. Actually smiled, not that half smirk he usually wore. You're right. I'll give you 90 minutes. Make them count. He walked away, leaving Rachel standing there, heart pounding. Her coworker in the next cubicle leaned over. I've worked here 3 years and never seen anyone talk to him like that. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, Rachel muttered. Sitting down to rewrite the talking points, the corporate game Friday evening. Julian appeared at her desk at 6:30, just as Rachel was preparing to leave. You have plans tonight? He asked. I was going to do something radical like sleep. Why? There's a charity gala at the Four Seasons. I need a date. Rachel looked up from her computer. Excuse me? Not a real date? Corporate theater. My board has been pressuring me to seem more personable and less like, how did they put it, a robot in an expensive suit? He straightened his cufflinks. You'll accompany me, make small talk, and help me appear human. That's not in my job description. Consider it an addendum. I'll pay overtime and cover the cost of appropriate attire. Rachel wanted to refuse, but the mention of overtime made her pause. She was still catching up on bills from her freelance dry spell. Fine, but I'm not pretending to be your girlfriend or anything weird like that. Agreed. Just my colleague, who happens to be accompanying me. Julian checked his watch. I'll have a stylist sent to your apartment at 7 tomorrow. The event starts at 9. A stylist. Julian, I can dress myself. I'm sure you can. But this crowd judges everyone by their appearance, and I won't have them dismissing you because your dress came from a department store. The comment stung, probably because it was true. You know, most bosses don't insult their assistants. Most assistants don't tell their bosses when they're being unreasonable. He headed toward the elevator. 7 o'clock, Rachel. Don't keep the stylist waiting. Playing dress-up, the stylist who arrived at Rachel's tiny apartment was a whirlwind named Tobias, who took one look at her closet and declared it a disaster zone. Darling, we have work to do. He pulled out his phone. What size are you? Actually, don't tell me, I can see. And your shoe size? 2 hours later, Rachel stood in front of her full-length mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress Tobias had chosen was midnight blue, fitted perfectly to her figure. With a neckline that was elegant without being revealing, he had styled her hair in soft waves and applied makeup that somehow made her look like a more polished version of herself. You're a miracle worker, she told Tobias. I know, darling. Now remember, shoulders back, chin up, and if anyone asks where you got the dress, tell them Valentino. The car Julian sent arrived at 8:30. Rachel felt ridiculous climbing into a town car in her normal apartment building, where Mrs. Chen from 3B was watching through her window with undisguised curiosity. They picked up Julian at his brownstone in Beacon Hill, because of course he lived in one of Boston's most exclusive neighborhoods. When he got in the car, his eyes widened almost imperceptibly. You clean up well, he said. So do you? It was an understatement. Julian in a tuxedo should have been illegal. The man already looked like he stepped out of a magazine, and formal wear only emphasized his broad shoulders and commanding presence. Nervous? He asked as the car headed toward the Four Seasons. Should I be? These events are full of people who will judge you in the first 30 seconds. Try to use you for connections and smile while stabbing you in the back. Julian adjusted his bow tie. Just stay close to me and follow my lead. The ballroom was everything Rachel expected. Crystal chandeliers, tables draped in white silk, and people who looked like they bought their jewelry by the pound. Julian placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd. And Rachel tried to ignore how aware she was of his touch. Julian Cross. A man in his 60s approached, hand extended. Good to see you here. And who is this lovely young woman? George, this is Rachel Bennett, my personal assistant. Rachel George Whitmore, he sits on our board. Rachel shook his hand, smiling politely. Nice to meet you, assistant, eh? George's eyes sparkled with amusement. Is that what we're calling it these days? Julian's hand tightened slightly on Rachel's back. That's exactly what we're calling it, because that's what it is. Rachel runs my office and keeps me organized. Of course, of course. George winked at Rachel. Well, you're doing a wonderful job. I've never seen Julian look so human. As George walked away, Rachel leaned closer to Julian. Does everyone assume we're sleeping together? Probably. It's what people do at these things. They see a man with a woman and make assumptions. That doesn't bother you? Julian looked down at her, his expression unreadable. Should it bother you? Before Rachel could answer, a woman's voice cut through the conversation. Darling. Rachel turned to see a stunning redhead in a dress that probably cost more than Rachel's car approaching. She kissed Julian on both cheeks, in that air kiss way that rich people did. Vanessa. Julian's tone was polite but cool. I didn't know you'd be here. I wouldn't miss it. Father insisted I network. Vanessa's green eyes slid to Rachel, assessing and dismissing her in one glance. And who's this? Rachel Bennett, my assistant. How nice. Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. Julian and I go way back. We were engaged once, did he tell you? Rachel felt something uncomfortable twist in her stomach. He didn't mention it. Ancient history, Julian said firmly. If you'll excuse us, Vanessa, we have people to see. He steered Rachel away, and she could feel Vanessa's eyes burning into her back. So, ex-fiancé, Rachel said, once they were out of earshot. That must make these events fun. Vanessa and I were together briefly 5 years ago. Our families pushed for an engagement that neither of us really wanted. We ended it mutually and moved on. She doesn't look like she moved on. Julian stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Why do you care? It was a good question. Why did she care? Julian Cross was her boss. Nothing more. The fact that he was attractive and intelligent and sometimes almost kind when he forgot to be difficult did not mean anything. Don't, Rachel lied. I'm just making conversation. His dark eyes studied her face like he was reading a book written in a foreign language. You're a terrible liar. You're an impossible boss. I guess we both have our flaws. When the night shifts, the rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. Rachel found herself relaxing despite the intimidating crowd. Julian stayed close, occasionally touching her elbow or her back to guide her, and she noticed how people responded to him. They respected him. Maybe even feared him a little, but they also wanted his attention. Julian Cross had power, and in this room, power was everything. Around 11, they escaped to the balcony for fresh air. The night was cool, and Rachel shivered slightly in her thin dress. Without a word, Julian shrugged off his tuxedo jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It smelled like his cologne, something woodsy and expensive. Thank you, she said, pulling the jacket closer. They stood in silence for a moment. Looking out over the city lights, You did well tonight, Julian said finally. Better than I expected. Should I be insulted by your low expectations? I meant it as a compliment. These events are exhausting, even for people who grew up in this world. You handled yourself with grace. Rachel looked at him, trying to understand this man who could be so cold one moment and almost warm the next. Can I ask you something? You're going to anyway. Why did you really hire me? And don't give me that line about wanting someone who isn't intimidated by you. You could have found a dozen qualified assistants who would push back when needed. Julian was quiet for so long that Rachel thought he might not answer. Then he turned to face her, leaning against the balcony railing. Do you know what it's like to be surrounded by people who only see your money and power? Who agree with everything you say because they're afraid of you or want something from you? I can't say that I do. It's lonely. Isolating. You start to wonder if anyone actually sees you as a person, or just as Julian Cross, the billionaire CEO. He looked at her directly. But when you crashed into my car and immediately blamed me for stopping when you argued with me instead of apologizing profusely, I saw someone who didn't care about my money or my title. Someone real. Rachel's breath caught. This was not the Julian Cross she had built up in her mind. This was someone vulnerable, almost human. I'm still real, she said softly. Even when I'm working for you. I know. That's why I need you to promise me something. What? Don't change. Don't start treating me like everyone else does. Keep telling me when I'm being unreasonable. Keep pushing back. Keep being you. Rachel felt something shift between them, some invisible line being crossed. I can do that. Julian smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. Good. They stood there on the balcony, the city spread out below them, and Rachel realized she was in serious trouble. Because somewhere between the car crash and this moment, she had started to care about Julian Cross as more than just her impossible boss. And that was a complication. Neither of them needed the Miami mistake Monday morning brought. News that changed everything. We have a problem. Julian appeared at Rachel's desk at 7:30, earlier than usual. The Miami deal is falling apart. Rachel looked up from her coffee. The hotel acquisition? Yes, the sellers are getting cold feet, and we fly down tomorrow to salvage it. Pack for 3 days. We, as in you and me. You and me, plus David from legal and Amanda from finance. I need you there to handle logistics and take notes during negotiations. Rachel's mind raced. A business trip alone with Julian, even with two other people along, felt dangerous after Saturday night. She had spent all of Sunday trying to convince herself that the moment on the balcony meant nothing. "Is that a problem?" Julian asked, noticing her hesitation.
Oh.
"No problem. I'll be ready." The flight to Miami on Tuesday morning was on Crosstech's private jet, because of course Julian had a private jet. Rachel tried not to gawk at the leather seats and polished wood interior. Focusing instead on reviewing the acquisition documents, David and Amanda sat toward the front, deep in conversation about contract terms. Julian sat across from Rachel, working on his laptop, occasionally glancing up to catch her eye. "You're nervous," he observed after an hour. "I'm not nervous. I'm focused." "You've read the same page 3 times?" Rachel set down the document. "Fine, I'm a little nervous. I've never been part of a multi-million-dollar negotiation before. You won't be part of it? You'll be observing and taking notes. It's not very comforting." Julian closed his laptop and leaned forward. "Rachel, I brought you because you're smart and you notice things other people miss. Just watch, listen, and tell me what you see. That's all I need. And if I see something wrong, then you tell me. Privately, of course, but you tell me." The hotel in Miami was on South Beach. All Art Deco, elegance, and ocean views. They had a block of connecting rooms on the 20th floor. Rachel's room was between Julian's and Amanda's, which felt both convenient and uncomfortable. Reading between the lines, the first negotiation session happened that afternoon in a conference room overlooking the beach. The sellers were a family who had owned the property for 30 years. The patriarch, Robert Chen, sat at the head of the table with his 2 sons flanking him. Rachel took her seat in the corner, laptop open, ready to take notes. She watched as Julian transformed into full CEO mode, all business and controlled power. "Mr. Chen, thank you for meeting with us," Julian began. "I understand you have some concerns about the sale." Robert Chen was in his 70s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Cross, my family built this hotel from nothing. We're not convinced Crosstech will maintain its character and legacy. I assure you, our renovation plans will preserve the historical elements while modernizing the facilities." What the last 3 companies said before we turned them down? Watched Robert Chen's face as Julian talked numbers and projections. The old man was nodding politely, but his body language screamed distrust. His sons looked more interested in the money, but their father clearly had final say. During a break, Rachel pulled Julian aside. "He doesn't care about the money," she said quietly. Julian frowned. "Everyone cares about the money, not him. Did you see how he lit up when he talked about building the hotel? How his voice changed when he mentioned legacy. He wants to know the new owner will care about his life's work, not just profit margins. What are you suggesting? Stop talking about revenue and modernization. Talk about preservation and honoring what he built. Show him you understand what this place means." Julian studied her face. "That's not usually how these negotiations work, and maybe that's why the last 3 companies failed." Something crossed Julian's expression. "Respect, maybe. Okay, we'll try it your way." When they reconvened, Julian's approach shifted completely. "Mr. Chen, may I ask you something? When you first opened this hotel, what was your vision?" Robert Chen blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "I wanted to create a place where families made memories, where people felt welcomed and valued, not just like room numbers. That's what I thought." Julian pulled out his phone and showed him something. "This is my grandfather. He started Crosstech in his garage 40 years ago. When he died, he made me promise that any business we acquired would be treated with respect, that we'd honor the legacy of the people who built it." Rachel watched Robert Chen's expression soften. "Your hotel has a soul, Mr. Chen. I don't want to erase that. I want to strengthen it while ensuring it survives another 30 years. By the time they finished that afternoon, Robert Chen was smiling and shaking Julian's hand warmly. The deal was not done yet, but the ice had broken, crossing lines that evening. The team celebrated with dinner at a beachfront restaurant. Amanda and David excused themselves early, leaving Julian and Rachel alone at the table. That was brilliant, Julian said, ordering another bottle of wine. The shift in strategy. How did you know it would work? Rachel shrugged. I watched his face. People tell you what they want, even when they're not speaking. You really should have been a detective instead of a journalist. Maybe I'll add it to my skill set. Professional car crasher, assistant, detective. Julian laughed, and Rachel realized it was the first time she had heard him laugh freely. Not a polite chuckle or a sarcastic sound, but genuine laughter. You've changed things, you know, he said, his tone becoming serious. At the office, people are less terrified of me. I find that hard to believe. It's true. You argue with me in front of them, and suddenly they realize I'm not going to fire someone for disagreeing. You've made the culture better without even trying. Rachel felt warmth spread through her chest. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Don't let it go to your head. They walked back to the hotel along the beach, shoes in hand, letting the waves lap at their feet. The moon was full, casting silver light across the water. Can I ask you something personal? Rachel said. I might not answer. Why did you really end things with Vanessa? And don't say it was mutual. Julian was quiet for several steps. She wanted the version of me that existed in society pages. The billionaire, the powerful CEO, the man who could elevate her social standing. She never wanted Julian, the actual person. It must have hurt. It was clarifying. I realized that most people in my world are attracted to what I represent, not who I am. So I stopped looking. Stopped looking for what? For someone who sees me, really sees me. He stopped walking and turned to face her, until you crashed into my car and called me presumptuous. Rachel's heart hammered in her chest. Julian, I know. I know this is complicated and probably inappropriate and definitely against about 10 different HR policies. He stepped closer. But I can't stop thinking about you. About the way you challenge me. The way you make me laugh. The way you look at me like I'm just a person, not a bank account. You are my boss. I know. This could ruin everything. I know that too. Rachel should have walked away. Should have reminded him about professional boundaries and power dynamics. Should have protected her job and her heart instead. She closed the distance between them and kissed him. Julian's arms came around her immediately, pulling her close. The kiss was everything Rachel had imagined, and nothing like she expected, gentle and fierce at the same time. Full of weeks of built-up tension and unspoken feelings, when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, Rachel whispered. The worst, Julian agreed. We should stop, probably. Neither of them moved. The truth comes. Out the next morning brought clarity and complications in equal measure. Rachel woke in her own bed, alone, because despite everything, they had both agreed to maintain some boundaries. But when she met Julian for breakfast, the air between them crackled with new energy. We need to talk about last night, Julian said, stirring his coffee. I know, not here. After the meeting with the Chins, the final negotiation session went smoothly. Robert Chen signed the contract with a smile, shaking Julian's hand and thanking him for understanding what the hotel meant. You'll take care of her? Robert asked. Like she's my own, Julian promised. Back at the hotel, Julian led Rachel to his suite. They sat on the balcony, overlooking the ocean. I need to tell you something, Julian began. And you're probably going to be angry. Rachel's stomach dropped. What? When you crashed into my car, I had already seen your application for the writer position. My HR director flagged it because your writing samples were exceptional. I don't understand. Julian took a breath. I was planning to interview you myself, potentially for a different role. When you hit my car and then showed up for the interview, I saw an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To work with you directly? To see if you were as brilliant in person as you were on paper? The assistant position was not a punishment or a random decision. It was calculated. Rachel stood up, anger flooding through her. You manipulated me. You made me think I was working off a debt when really you were just playing some kind of game. It was not a game. Rachel, please listen. No, you lied to me. You let me believe I had no choice, that I was trapped. He always had a choice. I never forced you to stay. But you didn't tell me the truth either. Rachel grabbed her bag. I need to think. She left before Julian could respond, her mind spinning. Everything she thought she knew was a lie. The car crash had not been bad luck. It had been fate or manipulation, something in between. Rachel walked the beach for hours, trying to process. Part of her was furious at Julian for orchestrating everything. But another part, a quieter part, wondered if it mattered. Would she have said yes to the assistant position if she had known the truth? Would she have let herself fall for him if there had been no crisis forcing them together? When she finally returned to the hotel that evening, she found Julian sitting in the lobby, looking more uncertain than she had ever seen him. I was wrong, he said before she could speak. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I was afraid you'd say no, and I could not let you walk away. Because in 5 minutes of arguing with you on that street, I felt more alive than I had in years. Because you looked at me with fire in your eyes instead of dollar signs. Because I needed you in my life, even before I knew why. Rachel sat down next to him. I'm still angry, I know. But I also understand why you did it. In your position, trusting people is probably impossible. It's not an excuse. No, it's not. Rachel looked at him, this complicated man who had turned her life upside down. Here's what's going to happen. We're going back to Boston tomorrow. You're going to give me a week to decide if I want to keep working for you. If I stay, we're going to have very clear boundaries about our professional and personal relationship. And you're never going to lie to me again. If you don't stay, Rachel smiled slightly. Then you'll have to find another assistant who's not afraid of you. Good luck with that. Julian laughed, the sound tinged with relief. I'll take those terms. Good, now buy me dinner. You owe me at least that much. 1 month later, Achal stood in her new office, still getting used to the title on her door, Director of Communications. Julian had promoted her after she decided to stay, creating a position that let her write and manage projects without being his personal assistant. They had hired someone new for that role, a capable woman named Patricia, who actually enjoyed managing schedules and did not argue with Julian at every turn. You ready? Julian appeared in her doorway, looking handsome in a casual sweater and jeans. It was Saturday, and the office was empty, except for them. Our date. Our actual, real, no business involved date, Rachel smiled. They had been taking things slowly, keeping their relationship private while they figured out how to balance their feelings with their work. It was complicated and sometimes frustrating, but it was also real. Where are we going? It's a surprise. But you should know, I'm a terrible driver, Rachel laughed. Good thing I have experience with car accidents. As they left the building hand in hand, Rachel thought about the chain of events that led them here. A car crash, a manipulative job offer, weeks of arguments and attraction, a kiss on a Miami beach, and finally, the truth. It was not a fairy tale. Julian was still difficult and demanding, and sometimes impossible. Rachel was still stubborn and outspoken and refused to back down. They fought about work and argued about decisions and drove each other crazy on a regular basis. But they also made each other laugh, challenged each other to be better, saw each other as complete people, flaws and all. You know what I realized? Julian said as they walked to his car. What? You never actually paid for the damage to my Bugatti. Rachel stopped walking. Are you serious right now? Julian grinned. Completely. That's going to cost you. How much? He pulled her close, kissing her softly. About 50 years of putting up with me. Think you can handle that? Rachel pretended to consider. I'll need overtime pay. Done. And holidays off. Reasonable. And you have to admit that I'm a better driver than you. Julian laughed. Now you're pushing it. As they drove off into the Boston evening, Rachel reflected on how one moment, one accident, could change everything. She had hit a billionaire's car and somehow ended up with something far more valuable than money. She had found someone who saw her, really saw her, and loved what he found, and that was worth more than all the Bugattis in the world.